Okay, brief announcements and introduction.
Could you use the mic, please?
There's a mic right there.
Okay, brief announcements and introduction. Welcome. Thank you for coming to this event. Please do silence your phones right now. But feel free to leave out the door there under the exit sign, use the restrooms which are in the next building over, get refreshments during the event, but please do silence the phones. I'm going to now announce this mug that we have, Carl Jung abstract AI-generated image. So please grab one of those. We're selling them for $10. And then, the added benefit, in about 5 years, you're going to see another one at a Goodwill. Okay, so what is our group? Our group is one of many Jungian groups around the country, I would guess somewhere between 20 and 40 or more maybe, who have nationally known Jungian scholars, oftentimes Jungian analysts, present. It's been going on since the 80s. Personally, I was involved with one in Portland, Oregon when I was in law school. So I know there's many of them. And our goal is to be one of those groups, but to also be one of the more active and engaging one of those groups. We also do meetup events, which are not involving national scholars. That's something we started last year, and it's been very good for community building. And those are free. We do them at a coffee shop. Sometimes we reserve a room. Sometimes we just have it at the coffee shop. So please check that out on our meetup page. On our meetup page, we have all the events. On our website, we typically just have the nationally known Jungian scholar events like this one. So our group has been around since the 80s, and we primarily do what a lot of groups do, which is people who've written books, Jungian analysts, Jungian scholars, that kind of stuff. So check out our website as well. We have membership, which we also call supporter, because it supports our group and you get $10 off all of the paid events by being a member. We also have volunteers. Our board is entirely volunteers. We're a nonprofit. So if you'd like to be a volunteer, let us know too. I should say, I'm Elliot, I'm the vice president. Charlie is the president. We have other board members present today. So this is our first annual big event. This is a new concept that we're trying to start, which is having one big event every year. So thank you for coming. We have Lisa Marchiano. She's a writer, licensed clinical social worker, and certified Jungian analyst. She has other books besides the book that she'll be discussing today. Motherhood, Facing and Finding Yourself, and The Vital Spark, Reclaim Your Outlaw Energies and Find Your Feminine Fire. So as a lawyer, I'm just using the book, because if there's a law, just use the law. That's what I tell people. So I'm using the book. So please clap for Lisa. Let's welcome her to Phoenix, and I'm going to present her with one of our mugs.
Okay, this is the photo opportunity. Thank you. It's AI generated, really. It's nice. Okay. Well, thank you very much for that lovely introduction. It is great to be here today. It's so wonderful to speak to a room full of live, actual people. So this is very, very special. I'm just going to put this over here. And I have a few announcements too that I think I'm just going to get out of the way, because otherwise I will invariably forget them. So I just want to talk a little bit about some of the offerings that we have out there, that I have. So first of all, some of you may be familiar with Dream School, which is our 12-month self-paced online program that helps you learn how to work with your dreams. And I'll be talking a little bit more about that later, because it's sort of explains the genesis of the book in some sense. But if you're interested in a kind of more in-depth experience of working with your dreams, do check out Dream School. We're in the process of actually aligning the Dream School material with the book, and hopefully that will be done in the next few months. Also, I want to let you know that I have an online women's group, women's fairy tale group. It's called Spinning Straw. And it's really, are you a member? Oh, it's so great, isn't it? It's really just so great. It's a lovely, lovely group of women, and we just do a different fairy tale every month. And there are prompts and discussions, and we always do a live event. And it's just a very supportive, lovely community. I have an in-person women's retreat coming up in August in Tuscany. I think it's going to be fantastic. We're going to be doing a lot of dream stuff actually on that retreat, as well as fairy tales. We're going to be concentrating on Italian fairy tales, but there will also be day trips and pasta making and all of that wonderful stuff. It's at a beautiful villa right outside of my favorite place on the planet, which is Siena, Italy, and it's air conditioned. So, and if you're familiar at all with Siena and you know about the Palio, the famous horse race, the retreat ends the morning of the Palio. So it's a great opportunity to come to the retreat and then stay and experience the Palio. And then in no particular order, I know many of you who listen to the podcast probably know about our dream telepathy experiment, which I'm just having the best time with it. So, we just did our second transmission, and it was pretty interesting. There's going to be a post up soon on Instagram with some of the, some of the hits and the photo and that sort of thing. So it's for fun, honestly, but you can sign up anytime. So right now the sign up is at the book site, which is dreamwisebook.com. And we are going to be probably continuing it for the foreseeable because it's fun. So, and finally, the last announcement that I'm very excited to be able to make is that if you see this beautiful slide, the rest of the beautiful slides that I'm going to have today, the beautiful DreamWise book site, our promotional materials, our social media stuff on Instagram. If you've noticed how exquisite they all are, it's all thanks to this woman right here, Jessica Gonzalez, who is so, So, and she's re-upping this Jungian Life site. So it's going to look even better. It's going to be incredibly functional. She's unbelievably talented, and I'm so grateful. So let me talk a little bit about sort of how the book came about. We had Dream School, which we started in 2020, and in discussing this idea with Sounds True and my agent, it was agreed like this might make a good book. There hasn't been a kind of comprehensive book on Jungian dream interpretation for lay people since really Inner Work from Robert Johnson, which is just a really fabulous book. But, we all kind of thought, it's time for a re-up on that. And we thought we sort of had that in our hands with the Dream School material. So we started drafting from there. And what I became aware of is that I really wanted to try to, as much as possible, operationalize Jungian dream work. So Jung was, for reasons that I really understand, he tried to stay vague. He didn't want to turn anything into a technique that you could just apply. He wanted it. He never wanted it to be an algorithm. He wanted it to be fresh and immediate and not a cookie cutter list of steps. And although I so appreciate that, I can also tell you that I think that as Jungians going through Jungian training, like the thing about Jungian training is no one really teaches you anything. You have to sort of learn it all yourself. And that's wonderful in a way, but I do think there's some space for helping people get their hands around it. So I'm really, really interested in, Elliot was nice enough to refer to me as a Jungian scholar, which is not how I think of myself. I'm much more interested in the kind of practical application of these ideas and also in seeing if they can be made accessible. So I wanted to see how accessible we could make this, and I also want to talk about more of what I mean by that in a minute. But that's what I was thinking about the whole time that I was drafting it was, I kept on saying to Deb, I said, okay, so it's a cookbook. This is a cookbook. That's what we're doing. Yeah, I don't know what that is. There's a bumping noise. I don't think it's me moving, but I'm... Okay. That, a little bit?
Yeah, like that.
Okay. Muted it. Is it? Okay. Can you hear me now? Yeah. Okay. And hopefully, yeah. Okay, so, sorry, I just have to remind myself what I was saying. Thank you, cookbook. Okay. So it's like, it's a cookbook. We want to tell, and I just said, Jung didn't want a technique, but here we're going to give you a recipe. And then the other thing I would think about is how would you teach someone how to tie their shoes, right? If someone's never tied shoes before, it's like, we'll take both of the strands and then you cross them over, and but it's hard, right, to think about how do you tie your shoes. At this point, the way that Deb and Joseph and I work with dreams, we don't think about what we're doing. It just got internalized over time. So, but I was really curious, what am I doing when I do that? Why is, because sometimes I'll be working with a dream and I'll say, well, what was going on here? And the person will answer, I'll be like, okay, I think it's this. And I have no idea why I asked that question or what information I got from the answer or how I used that to come to an understanding. It's a very kind of implicit process. And I wanted to see, it felt like it would be valuable to try to make it as explicit as possible. And again, does it violate in some sense Jung's desire to really sort of retain the mystery around it? Yes, but I think what we gain perhaps is that we are able to get out of the ego perspective in some sense that that dominates the way that we think about dreams, and I'm going to talk more about that in just a minute. So the point of the book, hopefully, is to give you the tools to work with your own dreams as much as possible, which is a very, very difficult thing to do. I work with dreams, pretty much every day I'm hearing somebody's dream somewhere and working with it. And, I don't know how many dreams I must interpret over the course of a week. And I feel, relatively competent at it. But I wake up from my own dream, I'm like, I have no fucking idea what that means. And I don't think I'm alone with that. And I'll start working on one of my own dreams and I have to remind myself, no, Lisa, remember it's symbolic, right? So it takes a kind of vigilance to cultivate that openness to the unconscious. And that's really what I'm hoping the book will help all of us do, including me. Okay, Jung said at one point, and I'm paraphrasing, that he really doesn't have a theory of dreams, and the one thing he knows about dreams is that dreams are meaningful. And I would say that if I'm going to add anything to that, it would be that I believe that dreams, that when we dream, some part of ourself is trying to communicate with us. That's my theory of dreams, is that it's a communication. And on that, so this is, I think, such an important quote. In each of us there is another whom we do not know. He speaks to us in dreams and tells us how differently he sees us from the way we see ourselves. When, therefore, we find ourselves in a difficult situation to which there is no solution, he can sometimes kindle a light that radically alters our attitude the very attitude that led us into the difficult situation. So, that's quite a lot there in this one quote. There is another whom we do not know, and he sees us differently from how we see ourselves. He knows something about us that we don't know. He knows something, we use it in the book, knows something about us that we don't know, something about our situation that we don't know. And how valuable might that be to get this different perspective? There's a whole different perspective available to us in the unconscious. And the way we can access that different perspective is through dreams. However, and this kind of goes back to what I was trying to get at before, because it's so different, this other perspective, there's a way where sometimes we don't really want to know. In some sense, some of what the dream maker might be showing us is stuff that we've repressed, to use the Freudian term, or at least forgotten about, or at a minimum devalued. So it's very, very difficult to access it. When we wake up in the morning with a dream, being able to understand that message is really, it's not so easy. So I want to talk for a minute about the ways that I'm going to say, defend against the messages in dreams. So I made a list. So first of all, we may not value or attend to our dreams, or we may devalue them. So that's certainly not true of anyone here. But I know that we all have people in our lives who say, dreams? No, dreams are weird. Or why, why, dreams don't mean anything. They're just some kind of, they're just like a byproduct of this, process that happens where you're kind of doing a deep clean at night, So as a culture, we tend to devalue them. And many of us personally devalue them. We may not remember our dreams. That's one of the number one questions we get, is how can I remember my dreams? A lot of people don't remember dreams. And although I think that is a very complex phenomenon, and there's probably many different reasons why people don't remember their dreams, at least part of the reason, I think, is because there's a part of us that doesn't want to know. So sometimes I think, we just, the wakefulness comes and we just sort of push that out because we don't want to know. We may remember our dreams, but then tell ourselves, oh, I'll write that down later. Has that ever happened to you? You wake up and, oh, that's interesting. Oh, I heard someone laugh. Yeah, you think, I'm gonna write that down later, and you go back to it 5 minutes later, 10 minutes later, an hour later, you cannot remember it at all. It's gone. So you let it slip away. Or we say, oh, well, it's not, it's not an unimportant dream. I'm not going to write that one down because it's not important. So I have people that come in for analysis, did you dream? Yeah, but none of them were important, so I didn't write them down. I'm like, wait a minute. That's a pretty big assumption. Like, how did you make that assumption that it wasn't important? Sometimes it's like, people are waiting for like the blockbuster 5-part dream with a sort of cinematic ending. It's like, well, no, tell me the little one that you thought was unimportant, because I bet that's more important than you thought it was. Sometimes it's like, well, I was going to write it down, but it's too confusing. It's too weird. Or it's too obvious. I know what that dream means. This is incredibly common. Someone comes in and did you have a dream? Yeah, I did, and I know what it means already. I'm like, really? So just kind of like a little example of that. Someone who, he had a dream about how he treated a woman in his dream, and he's like, yeah, I know, that dream's about my ex-girlfriend. And it's like, well, I don't know about that, because if it were about your ex-girlfriend, you already know that. You wouldn't have had a dream about that, because you already know that consciously. The dream's going to tell you something you don't already know. So I don't know that that's true, right? So we explored it and kind of came up with some other meanings that really surprised him. So, if you really understood a dream, you're likely to be really surprised by what you've understood. Like, it will be something new that you hadn't thought of before. So we decide that we already know what a dream means, and in doing so, we've interpreted it according to the waking ego perspective. And this is the number one thing I think that's so difficult about working with dreams, is we all have these nice, strong egos that are really good. They help us get through the day. They help us manage our affairs. They help us deal with tax season and our mother-in-law and all that good stuff that they've got to do. But we wake up and that ego consciousness just lands on the dream and says, I know what it means. And we craft our understanding of the dream according to what we already know, just like this little example that I just gave. And that's it. And it's a dead end. And we're not receiving what the unconscious has offered. And that's why I wanted to make some of these processes explicit, because I thought if I could come up with a little, kind of Swiss Army knife for dream interpretation that could pop us out of our conscious perspective, then we might be able to get beyond that ego perspective a little bit and hear the wisdom of the dream. And, when you're working with an analyst with your dreams or with a dream group, other people can do that for you. But sometimes you don't have an analyst, or you can't afford an analyst, or you're not in a dream group and you can't find one. And so what do you do then? So the techniques in the book are really meant to help you get out of your own way to understand your dreams. So how we did that with the book was with these kind of little prompts that we wound up calling keys. And there are 69 keys throughout the book, and they're each just a little different way of thinking about something in the dream to help you get a different perspective on it. And 69 sounds like a lot. What I suggest to people is that if you have a dream, that you just pick a key. They're all listed in the back too. Just pick a key and just try it. And again, that defensiveness is going to come up because your conscious mind is going to go, that one doesn't apply. Okay, but just try it. And spend a couple minutes thinking about it, maybe journaling. It might unlock something. So you do that for a few minutes and then go on to the next one. Just pick another one. See what happens. And I have found that when I do that with my own dreams, that after about maybe 5 to 10 prompts, that I've, often at least achieved a new level of curiosity about the dream, let's say. And sometimes an aha. So what I wanted to do for the rest of the time that we have together is to go through some of these keys. And I hope that you brought a dream. Did most people bring a dream to work with? So I'm going to invite you to do that with your own dream. And then we'll see if people want to share. You don't have to share. So you can participate without exposing yourself. But some people will want to. So the first key that I included, and I did not bring all 69 here today, thank goodness, is one that probably most of you are very familiar with, because this is kind of a basic starting point, and that is personal associations. So the key is always explore personal associations to key elements when beginning to work on a dream. Personal associations are so important that you should gather them for every dream. They are especially crucial for any dream element that has unique relevance to your life. So for example, you might dream of a car. Okay, that's fine. A lot of people dream of cars. But if you dream of a specific car, if you dream of the first car that you drove after you graduated from college, it's going to be really important to think about that car, what that car meant to you, what was going on at the time. So here are some of the questions to consider as you're working with personal associations. What is the essence of this person or thing? So it's not an exhaustive, sometimes someone brings in a dream to session and, I don't know, it has a friend from junior high in the dream. And I'll say, okay, so, what about this person? And, sometimes the person will tell me 20 minutes of stories about this person and we've gotten nowhere. So I kind of ask that question, what's the essence? Can you sum it up in a sentence or two? Who is this person or what is that thing? What's your primary emotion about this person or thing? Is there a decisive memory, not 15, that you have about this dream element? And if it's a friend or an acquaintance, ask yourself, how are you like this person? And in what way are you different? If an unknown person appears in a dream, can you identify any details that might elicit an association? What does your imagination tell you? It's okay to use your imagination. Sometimes the imagination doesn't really speak to us, but sometimes, well, what do you imagine about that person who was in your dream? And if there is an artist, actor, or musician in your dream, which work of theirs comes to mind? It's not always the case that it's about the person's creative output. Sometimes it's about the person's, biography. But most of the time, in my experience, it's about the person's, it's about the song the person wrote or the movie the person was in. And then day residue treated just like you would any other material. So a lot of times people will say, well, I had this dream about this, that, and the other thing, but I think it's just because I watched that movie before I went to bed. And it's like, yeah, obviously your dream was kind of borrowing that language from that movie or television show or whatever. But what associations do you have with that? It's still symbolic material. And there can be a tendency just to kind of dismiss it because you can tie it to something that happened the day. Well, I dreamed about that person because she called me yesterday. Okay, yes, and what are the associations? So once you have collected the associations, you can try applying them by making use of the following questions. What part of you is like this? Where is this dynamic in your life right now? And how might you be behaving like this? So let's just give it a try for a minute. And if you don't mind, if you have something to write on, that's fine. If not, you can just maybe take some notes on your phone or just do it as a mental exercise. Just pick a dream and work through this a little bit. Just take a few minutes to do that. Okay, probably for most of you who've had some experience working with your dreams, personal associations is pretty familiar. So before kind of soliciting any, before soliciting any contributions, just wanted to ask, does anyone have any questions? Yeah, we're going to send a mic around.
Hi. The only question I have right now is, you said the dreams mean something you don't know yet. But I have so many reoccurring dreams, and it seems like they're trying to tell me they're the same. So I don't know yet. I guess that's the point. I don't get it yet.
Yeah, I would say that. Can I ask you, are they exactly the same?
Not exactly,
Yeah.
but very much.
Yeah, but the details are a little different from time to time. Yeah, I would say you haven't gotten the message yet. But there's something your unconscious wants you to know. So, any general questions or questions about this process of doing personal associations? Yeah. Let's get the. I think we have some people on Zoom, and so using the mics, I think, will help them hear what's going on as well.
So if someone is in your life, like it's someone central in your life, and they show up in your dream, is that still just an association, or is that, where is the line between like it's reflecting on something that's actually happened, a real person in your life, or are they always just symbolic?
Dreams are never always just. There's no always. But what I would say is, so there is a key for this. Dreams are usually about the inner world, but sometimes they're about the outer world. And I would say that if you dream about someone who's in your daily life, like let's say your spouse, or a close family member or a colleague that you see every day, and the person shows up in the dream in very much a realistic way. They're acting like they would in waking life. They look like they do. They're wearing some, normal clothes. Then it could be about an outer dynamic. It could also be both. Sometimes what's true in the inner world is also true in the outer world. But what I would say is that even when it's about the outer world, it's usually, not always, but it's usually about like a dynamic in the relationship, for example, that we haven't seen, rather than sort of giving us information about that person. Although that occasionally happens. I've known of people who, we're sort of I guess it is kind of like a dynamic. I know someone who's kind of ignoring something. Obviously, there were subtle signs that things were not okay in the relationship, and the person kept on having certain dreams, and eventually, it was clear the dreams were trying to tell him there's something amiss here in what's going on in the relationship. But it's usually better to start with the assumption that it's about the inner world and that it's in symbolic, and then the only time you wouldn't start there is if it's like, again, someone in your personal life who's very, very present, who appears in a realistic way. So did anyone just working with the associations have anything they want to share that came up?
I don't want to be the one, so I raised my hand. Thank you very much, Lisa, for being here with us today, and thank you for all you do. It's fabulous. I just had a very brief dream this morning I wanted to report out on. So I recently moved to Scottsdale from Northern California, where my husband and I left a beautiful home that we had built about 37 years, and it was in the redwood forest and so on, so in nature, right, and cantilevered over a bit over a river, and so the dream that I had, and we sold that home about 5 months ago, and we're here full time. So the dream I had last night, and I asked my dream maker to bring me a dream, and this is what they brought me. So the California house, my husband burnt the house, set the house on fire, and we had to get out. And so he set the house on fire, and the fire was not a blazing rage of flames. It was instead more smoldering. And the emotion I had was certainly fear, but I had some guilt because I felt that my husband was doing it for nefarious reasons to collect the insurance money from it. My association with fire was that it was hot and then would destroy everything to ashes so that it was unrecognizable. Obviously, letting go of all of my possessions. And he is, so when I look at that, I go to fire associations, I go to he, which I see as the perhaps masculine, the animus in myself, as being the driver here of this nefarious act or destruction. And then just as he left the house, he turned on the barbecue, which is in the garage, and the garage was supporting part of the house. So the garage, I had the association of the base, the structure, the foundation, that he was wanting to burn it from the foundation up. And another emotion I had was remorse, guilt, fear that I was engaging in dishonesty. And he wanted me to leave the home, and I didn't follow my animus's direction. I snuck back, and that's that rebellious archetype that seems to come up in my life quite a bit. And I wanted to gather my things and take some things with me. And then I woke up just in a lot of anxiety and fear and regret. So.
And if you don't mind my asking, what were your associations with that house?
Creativity, nature, intuition, freedom, peace.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But it was also a property in which I was doing tremendous amount of telehealth work in the house. Mm-hmm. I'm retiring from my practice and, letting go of that or burning that down.
Yep.
Entering into a new stage of my development.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
It seems like that was a big dream. And we'll continue to work on the dream as we continue today. So with working through a dream like this, you're not necessarily looking for all of the information to come through one of the keys, right? It's like layers, So that's the first layer. Anyone else want to share anything? Yeah.
I have a dream, but this is not about this dream. When
Okay.
you started talking, you said, so for example, if there's a car in your dream, which took me back to another old dream, in which I was in my red car. It never occurred to me until you mentioned that that red car might have significance. And it just so happens that within the past 4 days, I had to buy a new car and get rid of the red car.
Huh.
And it was really difficult for me. It's like 9 years old, and I need more safety measures and all those things. But in thinking about buying a new car, I went back and looked at all the cars I've owned over my life. And they all were kind of like the first year they came out. Sometimes they weren't always good decisions. But as my daughter said to me, because you always have to be on the cutting edge of everything. And I realized that's what it was with this red Lexus when it came out 9 years ago. Nobody had one like this SUV with the funny grills and stuff. And when you said that, I thought, oh, I'm way back last year when I had that dream. Because what I need at my age, I need more safety features. It's getting old.
Yes.
It was wobbly.
Yes.
It was like a perfect description of me. And I never thought about that, right? And so now it's just fun to go back and say, oh, there's all these little details in a dream that you don't think mean anything, right? One of those fragments.
You know, thanks for that, because I think the thing is that, you know, in some sense, everything in a dream means something. Like the dream maker picked that car for a reason. The dream, you know, that's the little example I gave you before about the guy who dreamed about something with a woman, and he said, oh, that's my girlfriend. And part of it's like, well, no, your dream maker didn't put your girlfriend in your dream. Your dream maker put someone else in your dream. So everything, it's like the dream maker is such an exquisite creator that every decision has been made very carefully. So you have to be curious about why that car? Why did it take place here? Why was he wearing that shirt? And a lot of times we can't, you know, I try to play with those questions all the time with my own dreams, and also, you know, when I'm working with someone's dream. But it doesn't always yield something useful to ask that. I think it's important to ask it, and it might yield something amazing, but sometimes you just have to say, I don't know. But I think the assumption is everything is meaningful. Okay, let's jump into the next key. Some of the keys are, you know, like the one for personal associations, are very typical. You'd be familiar with them already. Some are quite novel, I think. This one is something that we talk a lot about on the podcast, and this is, you know, this is an idea that was first formulated by Layard, who worked with Jung, and then Pat Berry kind of reformulated it, but it's Layard's maxim. The dream ego's attitude is likely to be wrong, or as Layard put it, everything in the dream is right except perhaps the dream ego. Although we tend to align with the perspective of the dream ego as we consider our dreams, it's most often the case that the assumptions, feelings, and attitudes of the dream ego are off base. Trying out this assumption with every dream is a good place to start. So, this is not always true that the dream ego, the attitude of the dream ego is wrong, and actually the more you do dream work, the less true this is. But it's true enough that I think it's worth trying on with pretty much every dream. Because a lot of times it just sort of pops open really interesting realizations. So, consider the following questions. What if the attitude of your dream ego is incorrect? What if the dream elements that seem bad or challenging are, in fact, bringing something valuable? What if you assumed that anything your dream ego finds wrong is actually helpful in some regard? And so, for this one, I have a sample. This is a dream from the book, and I think this is such a great dream. So here's this. This is a man in his 50s who's kind of beginning to think about retirement. So he brings this dream in. I'm holding my gold watch, and I notice that one of the tiny screws has come out. While I try to find it, several other pieces of the watch fall off, and I realize I will need to take it to a watchmaker. There are two old men who fix watches. They have set up their shop in a hotel room. They are irascible and taciturn. They look at the watch and tell me that it's a cheap movement and not worth fixing. I point out that the case is made of gold. They tell me it's just gold plate. I point out to them the 14-karat stamp, but they tell me that is only true of a small part. Most of it is just gold plate. They hand me my watch back in many pieces. The crystal is cracked, and it wasn't before I brought it in. I complain to them that they cracked the crystal, but they insist I gave it to them like that. I am leaving with it in a plastic bag, upset that my watch is in pieces and that they don't understand its value. So just to give you a little bit of context, if this dreamer were going to work on personal associations, this was a watch he actually owned. It was a watch that he bought with money that his grandparents gave him when he graduated from college. And his grandparents were sort of like second-generation immigrants, and they were very, very proud of him going to college and going off to medical school, and they gave him this money, and he bought a gold watch, and he'd been working as a doctor his whole life, and now he was kind of getting ready for retirement. So you can kind of imagine what that watch might mean, or maybe have some ideas about that. Okay, so if we think, so when he had this dream, what he thought when he woke up, remember I said we just apply our ego attitude to the dream. He said, yeah, I'm so sick of people trying to rip me off. This happened, last week when I took the car in, they were trying to rip me off, and here it is again. They're trying to rip me off in my dream. And he was like angry when he woke up. He was like angry at those watchmakers. And I was like, I don't think that's what the dream means. So if we say, what if the attitude of the dream ego is wrong? So in the dream ego's attitude is, those watchmakers are trying to rip me off. What if the watchmakers are right? What if the watch isn't really valuable? What if only a tiny part of that watch is valuable? Only a little bit of it is actually gold. The rest is just gold plate, meaning it looks valuable only on the surface. So you can see how asking that question could really let the medicine of the dream in. Now, so what I'll say is that, this man had been operating under a certain set of values his whole life. The values of you should achieve, go to school, do the next right thing, and this kind of almost a family with a certain kind of like immigrant attitude. We're going to work hard. We're going to sort of achieve in this very particular way. Just put your head down and do the next thing. And now here he is, approaching retirement. He's kind of burnt out. And those values that governed the first, 2/3 of his life, they've fallen apart. They've fallen apart. And they're not really valuable anymore. So, but he didn't get that until we talked about the dream. So, okay. Give me just a second. Sorry about coughing into the mic. Okay. So let me ask you, first of all, any questions on that? Yes. Give us just 1 second to get the mic to you. Over here.
This is a challenging key for me because in my dreams, I am generally, if not always, the protagonist.
Yeah.
And that person in my dreams behaves in a way that I genuinely, I love that person.
Uh-huh.
That person is, I think of it as a better part of myself.
Uh-huh.
And now I'm faced with the concept of, I may have to be suspicious of my,
Yes.
of my friends.
Goes down hard, doesn't it?
Of my rapport for that person.
Yeah. Well, it's like I said, it's not always true. Sometimes the dream ego is more right than the other perspective. I've seen that. And sometimes there's not a big discrepancy. It's just something to try on. It's we can get pretty attached to our ego attitude. So it can be challenging. Any other questions before we try this one out?
I have a question. I dream a lot about packing up a house or for a trip.
Yeah.
And I don't have enough time to pack. I've left it to the last minute. I'm moving. Frequently I'm moving and I can't pack my house up the way I want to because I've left it so long, and the time's very short. I'm going to have to leave things behind. And so sometimes I will look up, like on the internet, what does a packing dream mean, or losing your teeth or something like that. And then I've always associated those dreams with, like, I'm overwhelmed with something and I don't feel like I'm able to give enough time to the project I have, or that I'm overwhelmed in some way and my house isn't in the order I wanted or something like that. Now I'm questioning that association with these many dreams I have about not having time to pack. So I guess I have to rethink that. What does that mean?
Well, I mean, first of all, I definitely think that the feeling tone of a dream like that is certainly, kind of irrefutable, right? There's a sense of being pressured and overwhelmed, and that often can just kind of mirror maybe an outer life emotional experience, perhaps, depending on what's going on. But I think that the part that you said there that maybe I'd get curious about is the sense that I'm going to have to leave things behind.
Yes.
And that's the part that could be interesting to play with. Like, maybe those things need to be left behind.
Well, and when I think of that now, because I never really thought about that before, I moved around a lot as a child. We had many, many moves in my life, and maybe it's more about what I'm leaving behind, what I have to leave behind, than that I'm overwhelmed with the packing.
Yeah, and so the ego, and again, we're just playing, right? The spirit of this is playful, not deciding like this is what it means, but just playing with it. The ego is like, I've got to figure out how to pack that. But what if it's like, oh no, I'm not going to be able to bring that with me.
Right.
So yeah, that would just be a way to
Thank
play
you.
with it. Yeah. Just.
So, if I start crying, just ignore me. But I tend to have two recurring dreams. One is I'm constantly being chased, and then I wake up like having a nightmare. And the other dream is that one of my children, they're in danger, and it haunts me. Those two dreams, and take a look at what am I trying to say to myself? So those are I have other dreams, but those seem to be the ones that recur.
And the first one you said is that something's chasing you.
Someone's chasing me.
Yeah. Have you ever tried to have a conversation with whoever it is that's chasing you?
I don't know who it is.
But you might imagine in waking life, you might do an active imagination the next time you have one of those dreams, where you go back into the dream, you imagine that you're being chased, and then while you're awake, you turn around and say, what have you come to teach me? Because when something's chasing us in the dream, it means there's some part of us that wants to get our attention. It has something relatively urgent to tell us, and that's why it's chasing us.
Okay.
And it wants to bring consciousness, which is why we wake up. And we're afraid of it because the ego is often afraid of the new attitude that the unconscious presents. But really, that new attitude, just going back to our first slide, is often the thing that can expand us. So I think one of the things that happens is that we assume, because we're frightened, we assume it's frightening, if that makes sense. But I would invite you with a chase dream to think a little bit about, what if it's not so scary? What if there's just some part of me that wants me to know something?
Okay. Stop, look, and listen. Stop, look, and listen.
Well, get curious.
Yeah.
How about that?
No, thank you.
Jess, did you have a question?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, sorry. Okay. Okay.
Okay, sorry for that. I had a question about that dream. I was curious what the man's attitude was specifically towards his own retirement. Was he looking at it with a lot of reluctance, like, oh, I've been super achievement oriented?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I love the question, and I think the answer is that he's in the process of giving up those gold watch values.
Yeah.
And I think the dream is actually really interesting because the dream shows that they've already kind of dissolved. Like it's really kind of already over. He's actually really looking forward to retirement.
Okay.
But after spending his whole life being in this achievement-oriented vein, it's a little uncomfortable that he, because he was thinking about, like, do I want to have a second chapter and go, some of his colleagues go on to do amazing things, and he's like, I think I just want to like putter and garden, But that attitude is not very in alignment with how he's lived the rest of his life.
Right.
So there is a degree of conflict around that. But I think the dream says that ship has sailed. The watch is in pieces,
He has to reconstruct it now himself.
I think he has to let the watch go.
Okay.
Yep. And maybe there's that tiny little piece of gold to hold on to.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It was right up here in the front.
I was just curious, with any of these keys, none of the rules are hard and fast,
Right.
right? So, but in this case, we're kind of working off the assumption the dream ego is probably wrong. But how would we kind of, after working with the dream, or I guess what the process is for determining, how do we know that the dream ego is wrong?
I think if you try it out, like with this one, you don't know it's going to work. But then when you do, it's sort of like, oh, that makes sense. And it was what I said before, it was something you might see it as sort of surprising. It's like, oh, I didn't know that. I didn't see it like that. And you get that click, you get that aha, or it opens something up. And sometimes you try it and it doesn't even really fit. Like, maybe it won't fit in your dream if you try it, Maybe there are other things that it just doesn't, you feel like you're forcing it, then you can let it go. But, it's like hold everything with a bit of a light touch and see if it opens something up. See if it works, basically.
Right. Does it resonate?
Yeah. Does it resonate? Yeah. So let's take just a minute, not too long, maybe literally just like a minute. And if you have a dream, just try this key with the dream. You can write it. You can just think it. Oh, yeah. Yeah, good point. And by the way, Charlie, if there's anyone from Zoom who has a question or anything, happy to kind of entertain that. So. Okay, anyone have anything that came up as you did this, or any other questions, or anyone want to share anything? Yeah.
Yeah, I just had a thought from the dream that I shared earlier.
Yes.
You know, I asked the question of, what if, it were the opposite, right?
Yep,
What
yep,
if?
yep.
What if going back for my things wasn't a bad idea? What if I didn't go back and try to retrieve my things? What if I simply let my things go? What would I experience?
Yeah.
And so right here, as we said, I had that experience, and that experience was of peace and surrender and okayness. Yeah.
Yeah.
Letting go is good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What if it was a good thing to let the house burn?
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah.
Thank you.
It helps bring that shift. So.
I have many dreams at night, and I do not remember them. But there is one that really sticks to me, and I remember it in great detail. I'm at the top of a small hill, and there are railroad tracks going down the hill. And at the bottom of the hill, there is an opening like going into a mountain. And many different types of vehicles have gone down this hill, and they get stuck in the entryway, not running into something, but like fingers or something reaching out and grabbing them. So I figure I can get through there, so I get an Abrams tank. And in my life, I have nothing to do with Abrams tanks. But I get this tank. I don't know how I get it, and again, I don't know how I modify it to fit on the railroad tracks, but I fit it on the tracks, and I know that this tank is going to get through. So then I start thinking, how many people need to be in the crew of an Abrams tank? And I give up and I wake up. But I know I can get into that opening.
And do you have a sense of why you want to get in the opening?
No,
Or what's there?
because it's there.
Yeah, okay. So
That's weird.
dreams are weird. Okay. Yeah, there's a question back in the back row. Yeah.
Hi, I was looking through some of my old dreams, and I was looking at some of them don't even have basically value judgments or saying is something good or bad. Things just kind of happen, and I
Yeah.
look back and I'm like, well, there's some associations there, but it's not being this is a good
Right,
thing or a
right,
bad thing.
right.
In those cases, would it be just
Yeah.
don't even
Yeah,
throw
that
everything
that
out?
might be that's a great example, I think, of when this key might not really work, because if there isn't a strong feeling of that if the dream ego doesn't have a particularly strong stance, then this might not be the best key. So
Okay.
yeah,
Thank you.
that's a good question. Did I see another hand somewhere? Okay. Oh, okay. Okay. Oh, great. Okay. All right. I think I'm going to skip the next one, and we can come back to it if we have time. Okay, let's do this one. So, the thing that's really interesting to me about dreams is, as we know, usually dreams are about the inner world, and every element of the dream is some aspect of us. So dreams then offer us a wonderful opportunity to see about how our ego, our conscious personality, is interacting with unconscious parts of ourselves. So it's like a little, every dream, if you want to think about it like this, is like a little I don't know what, like a wedding, like a seating chart at a wedding. It's like, where is everyone in relation to everyone else? How are people, or like one of those, better yet, one of those genograms, like, how are they all relating? So it's sort of like a map to relationships in the inner world. So the key is take note of what the dream says about relationships in the inner world. So here are some of the questions to consider, and then we'll go through an example. What is your dream ego's initial attitude? What does it know or assume? Is there evidence in the dream that this assumption is correct? Who or what opposes your dream ego's position? And as per your question, sometimes that's not an aspect of dreams, but often it is. What values or attitudes might the opposing part represent? Because usually there's some challenge in a dream. So, what's the challenge? How does your dream ego relate to other dream elements? Does it move toward, turn away, or turn against? What does the action of your dream ego say about how you are treating inner conflicts? And is your dream maker exposing a tendency to avoid conflict? So in the book we have a bunch of different examples for this, but the one that I chose to bring here today is this dream. Sorry about that. I'm with my daughter. We are in a house somewhere and there are zombies. We go into the bathroom to get away from them. I have closed the door, but not all the way. It is open an inch or two. I turn and see that a zombie is peering in through the crack. I am scared, but not terrified. I close the door. The zombie manages to reach his hand under the door. I have an axe and I chop off his hand. Then he sticks his head under the door and I chop off his head. I feel relief that I have taken care of that zombie. Now I notice that the window is open and I decide to board it up. Okay, so again, thinking about this in terms of relationships in the inner world. So how is the dream ego, which usually stands in for the conscious attitude, relating to other parts, right? And the other parts in this case being the zombies. So first of all, the first thing we know is that the bathroom door is closed, but not all the way. So she's not totally closed off to these other aspects of herself. There's a little bit of openness there. And interestingly, the zombie seems kind of curious. Doesn't it say that in here? Well, I think that was just in the associations. But that is something this dreamer reported, is that the zombie seemed kind of curious. Zombie's kind of looking, there's the possibility there for connection. But then what happens is I close the door. So when we close the door, then we've set up a kind of adversarial relationship with the unconscious. Now, the zombie, going to your dream about being chased, the zombie still wants to connect. The zombie has something that it wants to bring. So it reaches his hand under the door. Now she's in full defense mode. She's going to chop off the hand. Then the zombie still is like, hey, wait a minute. Can't we be friends? It's chopping off the head, and then she has to board up the window. So there's an initial kind of openness, but the dream ego gets more and more and more closed off, which is okay. I mean, this is a woman that I worked with for a while, and I remember when she had this dream, she had had many very frightening dreams before this one, and she was very impressed by the fact, she said, yeah, I was scared but not terrified. She could really trace that she was having a different experience of these frightening elements in the dream. So it's always a process. But, okay, so any questions on this? And I'm going to go back to the key itself.
So since it's a question about that dream specifically, I'm trying to think what sort of relationship she could potentially have with the zombie. Because when I personally think of a zombie, I think the only thing it's going to want from me is my death.
Yes.
So
Yes.
what are your thoughts on that?
Okay. So that is what the ego thinks of this unconscious content, right? So the dream ego has its assumptions about, first of all, that's a zombie and what the zombie wants. Actually, the zombie is not behaving in a particularly threatening way. It's kind of peeking around the corner. It seems a little curious. But the dream ego makes an assumption. Just like with your dream, you're being chased. You assume that whatever's chasing you or whoever's chasing you wants to do something bad to you. But it's part of our ego defensive nature against the unconscious that we make assumptions that it's something harmful. So it is actually really important, per your question, to consider that first part of the prompt. What does the dream ego assume, and then is there any evidence for it? So sometimes, a lot of times, you have a frightening dream, and when you think about it, the frightening thing in the dream actually wasn't behaving in a threatening way. It's just that the dream ego in the dream made a lot of assumptions about it. You know? So yeah, I mean, I know in general zombies just kind of want to eat your brains, but you know, I mean, they can evolve too. I mean, there's been what was it? Was it Shaun of the Dead? Or no, there was that one about the zombie falls in love or something. Remember that? There was a whole like genre of zombie love films. Anyone help me out with that?
What do you think her?
What? What was that? Warm bodies. Okay.
So what do you think that her personal association was with the concept of zombies? Just the general conceptualization that they are just all bad? Is that what you?
Yeah, I mean, yes. We discussed this dream in session. I can't remember all of the details, but yeah, you know that the zombie was, you know, zombies come after you. Zombies, you know, are impersonal, right?
Yeah.
They don't have a personal relationship with you. But even in this dream, it's really interesting because she said zombie was kind of curious. That is not a typical zombie emotion, right? They're not curious. So it lets us know that something is not quite what the dream ego assumes it is at the beginning. And you know, it's still a little bit too frightening to really relate to. But it's changing. So sometimes, and I think this will make what I'm saying clearer, sometimes people have a dream series. And the terrifying thing will start off being a faceless dark force. And then maybe they'll have a dream where it's this horrible monster. And then maybe they'll have a dream that it's a zombie. And then maybe they'll have a dream that it's like a bad man. And then maybe they'll have a dream next time that it's like an oversized dog. And then, you know, actually that was not a good example because it gets closer to consciousness, right? So forget the dog and then it's a good example. Because the frightening thing is getting more humanized, closer to consciousness, able to have a relationship with it. You can't really have a relationship with a zombie. I mean, I've never tried, but I hear it's not a good idea. But this zombie, like maybe you almost could because it was curious. So it is about this is about how are we relating to our unconscious? Are we relating to the unconscious like it's a flesh-eating zombie? Because it's not. Now, that's not to say that there aren't genuinely dark things in the unconscious that can persecute us. That does sometimes get outpictured in dreams. Not that often, but I've seen it. But most of the time, what looks frightening in the dream is just something that wants to come forward and bring a new perspective that feels threatening to the dream ego. Like going back to the gold watch guy, to your question, like, yeah, he was like, the watch was done. He was looking forward to moving on. But he still had spent his entire life living according to the gold watch. So, so he didn't just want to be like, oh yeah, that was a waste of time. So, too bad I did that for the last 40 years. You know, we're attached to our particular perspective. So when the unconscious comes along and says, actually, that's just a piece of shit. Like, there's a part of us that doesn't want to hear that. And a lot of times that resistance to hearing what the unconscious has to say is portrayed in the form of like a fearful image. So I hope that didn't just make it less clear. But okay, lots of questions.
Just a quick question. Other people in your dreams, like the daughter was in the dream, so I would assume like I'm trying to protect my child from something. What is it all like? Is that meaningful that the daughter was in the dream? Well,
I think probably in this case it was something like, the way that she and her daughter are kind of in identification around something. The daughter could be a kind of young part of her. So rather than, in this, I don't think it was specifically like there was something going on in the daughter's life and this was really about that, so.
Well, first of all, you're clearly paid off by the zombie lobby, so we all know that now. I was just kind of noticing, and I think all of us maybe are feeling this, it's so not intuitive to try and make sense of like what is in the real world, like bad guy figures in the dream, they could actually be like this important messenger of something. So that's really interesting. What do you think it means that in this dream, her attitude was, so glad I chopped that hand and head off. Like she's going to board up the windows and she thinks she's good and she's totally taken care of that. What might that mean? Yeah.
Well, I think that it's a pretty typical attitude that we have. Like those of us who function well, and I'm assuming that most days that applies to me, and I'm assuming it applies to all of us here. Part of the reason we function well is because we can keep the unconscious at bay. Right? So like being able to board up unconscious contents is really, actually, it's not a bad thing because, if we can't do that, then, we'd be psychotic. So, and this person, she was highly educated, she was very, and she had a fairly chaotic childhood. And so she definitely was good at boarding those, board those zombies out. I think it came very naturally to her to do that, and she was so good at it. But the zombies were kind of breaking in on her when she came. She was having trouble managing big feelings when she started work with me because she was really angry, and the anger would just burst out because she'd always just sealed it off. Right? So then we started working on it, and she was better able to tolerate this and be curious and let other feelings come in. So she became a lot more, and still is becoming a lot more kind of fluid with it. But in some sense, I mean, the dream is great, right? Because it pictures like now there's more openness, the door's open a little bit, the zombie's curious, the zombie's peering, she's scared, she's not terrified. But then it's just so easy to go back to that old strategy of, whoa, that makes me uncomfortable. Let me chop that off, board up the window. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and it's even making me wonder, is it significant that not only was there a zombie that made it into her home, she wasn't like in the town square running from a zombie, but she went into the bathroom, which is like the most intimate personal space in the house. So that seems like it ties in with what you're saying. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and then she just kind of goes, she reverts to, I think, a very normal place to be, which is boarding up the windows and chopping off a zombie. Like, we all need to do that to an extent, and when we do it too rigidly, we lose touch with the unconscious, we lose touch with our emotional life. So, anyway, great question. Yes, over here.
So when working with this key in my dream, the main relationship is antagonism, but there are also supporters, so I'm trying to sort that out.
That's interesting.
So basically, classroom setting, a girl's chasing me, we're all kids, they're looking at her chase me, and at one point I say, where are the adults? You'd think they'd be here by now. And another kid says, yeah, where are the adults? and then it switches to a conference room where my stuff's on a table, and she's chasing me. And I know she's evil-like, but everyone else thinks she's, short, cute, and sweet. And a colleague from work believes me, and I'm relieved. So he and I try to kick her out, but she keeps coming back in. So it's partially successful. Last part, still in a conference scene, talking with some people, and I realize she's infiltrated my phone. So is the main takeaway still the antagonism, or maybe should learn, or is there also the support part?
Yeah. No, that's a really good question. Wait, just tell me for a second, who is the person who's chasing you?
A girl who's trying to get me.
Okay.
And at one point, she even says, I might drop this over your baby. I have a new 6-week-old first baby at home.
Oh.
It's like a packet of a hospital blanket, but I know my baby's inside.
Okay.
But it's like a trick, like maybe I'll do this, and I evade. I've never been able to figure out that part.
So, wait, I'm sort of trying to think about your question generally, and then, because it's a great general question. So, like, what do we do in a dream? Let me do with the general thing first, and then I'll try to address the specific dream. So what do we do when there are some allies and then some enemies? And how do we understand that? And I think that it depends, but it is possible to sort of say, okay, back to our what if the dream ego is wrong, then we might imagine that the allies are aligned with the conscious perspective to defend against whatever that content is, okay? But if both of these, well, it's always a paradox because usually both things are true at the same time. But if the content, like the person who's chasing you, is an image of let's say a really tough complex that kind of beats up the ego, then it might be that the ally in the dream is helping you with that. So, two possible ways to understand that dream, and I'm just being really general, is that whoever this is that's chasing you might want to bring something in that your waking personality is resistant to. And it feels like it's going to be dangerous. It feels like it's going to destroy something new. It feels like it's going to be challenging, and you don't want any of it. Okay. And there's some other people in the psyche, other elements in the psyche that are like, yeah, we got to keep that out, And sometimes it's right to keep out the new thing. Like I said, sometimes you do have to keep the zombies out. The other way to think about it, and again, I think they can sort of be true at the same time, is sometimes there can be a really tough complex that persecutes the ego. And what that looks like to me is, I always think about this in terms of like self-talk. A lot of us have a really brutal, some people call it an inner critic, but it's like if you have that voice that's just constantly berating you, I think about that from a dream work perspective often as a complex. And sometimes the dream shows us that we've got someone who's just kind of in there constantly beating up on us. Right? And then sometimes you do have to really mount a defense against that, not in the sense of banishing it or making it go away, because there's always something valuable in it. It might just need to, it might need to be transformed. It might need to have a different relationship with the ego. It's like, okay, I get it. You want me to do my best. Shut up right now so I can at least get through the first draft. I'll bring you back when I'm editing, that kind of thing, But sometimes that inner critic can just get out of control, and we do have to have a kind of muscularity in the ego to address it. So does that help at all?
It does.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah. And then I think I'll take a few more and then we'll take a break.
Okay, so I'm sitting here thinking about the dream. And for whatever reason, I had a memory recall. when I was in high school, I was almost sexually assaulted. I was dragged into a car with 4 guys. I was at a party, and I started to cry, and thank God they threw me out of the car.
Oh, God.
Which point, my boyfriend was at the back of the house. I sought him out. He yelled at me that I must have done this on purpose. Got home, told my mother. She was very supportive. We knew who the guys were. Anyway, I won't go into all the details. But I'm just wondering if I've just never processed. I didn't go to therapy. I didn't do any of that. I just moved on. And, you know, there are times where I don't feel safe.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm just wondering, like, it got triggered. So I'm wondering now that maybe if that is the reason that the dream that I have maybe will get reframed. I'm not sure.
Well, first of all, what a horrendous thing to go through, and of course, I'm sure that stayed with you, and obviously contributes to a sense of not feeling safe. And I'll say that, you know, dreams can help us process experiences like that. The interesting thing with trauma dreams is they're usually exactly the same as the event. In other words, they're not symbolic. So when I used to work with Vietnam vets, for example, you know, they would have recurring dreams of the traumatic event in Vietnam pretty much exactly as it happened. The interesting thing that we know is that if you start working with the dream and discussing the event and discussing the dreams, over time the dreams start to change. And the details start to shift, and then shortly they do start to become symbolic. So what I would suggest, though, is that the dream that you're having of being chased by someone, is it very similar to that old experience?
What did you say?
The dream that you brought in of being chased,
right?
Is it an exact replica of this thing, this terrible thing that happened to you?
Well, I mean, I tried to get away. They caught me.
Yeah.
And then they threw me out of the car.
Yeah.
So it's really not, but at the same time, I think that there are times where, you know, my issue of safety comes into play.
Right. And I think that, you know, dreams are so incredibly creative that the dream is offering you, in some way that we probably just don't understand right now, is offering you a resource to help heal from that.
Well, thank you.
Okay, let's take, is it a 15-minute break? About a 15-minute break? And so we'll come back at, I don't know, what is that, like 11:48. Did I do the math right? While he's shaking the bushes, there's another announcement that I have. So when we launched the book, we created a very limited edition special merch. And one of the things that we created is these beautiful branded journals. You know what, Jess? I don't want to take. Can I? So, and actually, Jess designed these too. And it's just really beautiful. And oh, sorry. And all this stuff. But this is so cool because, oh yeah, here it is. Look at the spine of it. So it, I don't know. It's just really, it's a beautiful thing. So, it is an empty journal. It's a dream journal, and I think I have 3 of them, and I'm selling them for $20. And then the other thing that we made, which I think is so cool. So, Jess designed. See the little key? So that was the logo for the book that Jess designed. And if you can't notice what it is, it's obviously a key, but the top part of it is a snake. It's a serpent, for the Asclepian serpent. And then we had a very limited number of these little keys made, and I have a handful of them, and they are $50. So if you would like either a journal or a little key, you can grab me at the end. Now, a bunch of you have come up and asked me if I brought books for sale, but I flew from Philly, so I wasn't going to bring a whole bunch of books. So, Charlie, there are no physical books here, right? So I think I'm just going to have to suggest that you order from Amazon or Bookshop, or you can order directly from Sounds True or Barnes & Noble. I know that they don't, I know they're not physically in bookstores, because that's a thing, apparently, about hardcover books, but okay. So before we continue with looking at the keys, I just want to open it up to questions, and I know you had a question. Do you want to ask your question?
Okay. What's the name of the dreams that I want to know about?
Sorry?
The name of the dreams I want to talk about, where you get the actual information.
Oh, precognitive
and
dreams.
it
yeah.
actually happens in your life.
Precognitive dreams. So.
You know, because I have several of that, and pretty much I know if I figure it out, what I'm dreaming the night before is happening in my day the next day.
Yeah, okay, so the question is about precognitive dreams, and this is something that we discuss in the book. And, so here's the thing. There are maybe a couple different ways to orient to this kind of phenomenon where you dream something and then it effectively happens. So the first is this, very kind of striking thing where, is that bumping back? Just like, it's, okay, is that better? Okay. Where you dream something and then it seems to foretell an event. And there are some really extraordinary, striking, documented cases of this. One of the ones that we mentioned in the book is that Jung had this dream that this, terrible wolf came in the middle of the night and carried off his soul, and in the morning he woke up and received word that his mother had died. And so, it was interesting. Someone asked Jung about precognitive dreams. He said, yeah, they happen, but you're never going to know if it's precognitive or not until after the event happens. So don't waste your time worrying about it, just, you can't know if it's precognitive or not. Obviously, there's some very, very frightening dreams that people have, and they worry, is it precognitive? Most of the time, if you have a dream that you die or someone you know dies, it's not precognitive. So try not to be too frightened by those things. The other thing that's relevant to the question that you asked is this tendency that dreams have of kind of letting us know what's coming, which is a little different than precognition. It's more like dreams are a product of the unconscious. The unconscious is constantly scanning the environment, taking in all kinds of information, and tracking vast amounts of information for patterns below the threshold of consciousness. So Jung said at some point that dreams can kind of predict the future in the same way that a weather forecast can predict the future. Not because it's some irrational force that defies scientific understanding, but because the meteorologist says, okay, there's a low system over here, and there's a high pressure system over here, and this is moving in that direction, and so probably next Tuesday it's going to snow. And that's kind of what dreams do. Dreams are like, you're ignoring this really important thing over here, and if you keep on ignoring it, something like this might happen. So I think that a lot of times dreams that will kind of give us information about the future, they can warn us, like, be careful, this is coming down the pike. So it's helpful to think, is this dream trying to warn me about something or just alert me to something? But most of the time, not in this really extraordinary fashion that happens with precognitive dreams. Okay, let's move on to a different key, if that's okay.
Oh, thank you.
Oh.
I just had a really quick question,
Yes.
clarifying.
Yep.
Everybody wants to know what does it mean? What do I do when they have a dream? And is it? I'm assuming it's helpful to think that the dream might be their instructions, suggestions, directions, rather than answers or finalizing.
Yeah.
Do you understand my
You
question?
know, yeah, that's a really good question. I don't think dreams usually tell us what to do. I think that's very, very, very rare. I think that dreams help adjust our attitude. So, and it's like you might, you know, like the dream might be like, no, you've kind of got the wrong attitude toward this thing. And then if you let yourself take the dream aboard, your attitude will shift slightly, and that will mean that you maybe make different decisions about how you would handle something. But yeah, that's. I mean, it's not that it hasn't happened to me that I've, you know, been twisting on something and then I have a dream and the dream's like, you should do that. But it's really rare, and I think we all want that, you know, like especially if you're tormented by a decision, you want the dream to like the clouds to part and the dream to say you should go to graduate school, but usually it doesn't work that way. It's almost like the unconscious really puts the burden on the ego to make the decision, but it can help us develop a better attitude. Okay, so let's talk about feelings in dreams. Feelings and dreams are so important, and I, as you may have noticed if you listen to the podcast, I have to know what was the feeling in the dream. And this is one of those things where like I'm always asking, what was the feeling in the dream? And then that helps me, but I couldn't say like, how did that help me? I understand it better now, but I don't know why. Why did that help me understand it? So writing the chapter on feelings in the book was really challenging, and it took a lot of work, and the first few drafts were just a bloody mess, but I'm so happy with what we eventually wound up with, because I think it really brings in some important stuff that hasn't really been written about, as far as I know, much before. So, there's a whole chapter of feelings. I'm not going to go through all the keys related to all the feelings. I just picked out a couple. The first one is that positive feelings in dreams can usually be trusted. You can just kind of take it at face value. If there's something in the dream that you feel good about, then it's probably something good. Even if even if it's very unlikely, like even if it strikes your waking sensibilities as like awful, if in the dream you're like, oh, cool, I just murdered somebody, it's like, then it was probably good that you murdered the person. Let's see. And the other thing, and I have these two examples, is that positive feelings can sometimes help clarify an ambivalent image. So the first example is this very simple dream. I'm having sex with my father. The person who had this dream was like, oh, ew, gross, no. Does this mean I'm a, whatever. It's like, no, let's just take it at face value, You're having sex with your father in the dream and it seems great, So let's assume it's a good thing. How would that be a good thing symbolically? Well, she had a somewhat difficult relationship with her father, but her father had a lot of good qualities, and the dream was perhaps an image of her kind of finding some deep connection with these aspects of herself that were very much like her father. So she was kind of developing a positive relationship with some of these positive father qualities. So again, in the dream, it was great. Waking, that was another thing, but we can sort of say, well, let's just assume that this is actually a positive thing, and that helped us understand what the dream might mean. And here's an example of the ambivalent image. So, my dining room table has been left in a damp, dusty basement. It is covered with mold, and I'm cleaning it off. I'm so happy to have the table back and can't wait to put it in the dining room again. So, to me, this is an ambivalent image. You have this beautiful family heirloom table, but it's been in the basement and it's covered with mold. So, is finding it again like, yay, I got my table back, or is like, oh no, it's been ruined, right? And in the dream, the feeling is, oh, I'm so happy. So what it helped me do was, okay, I think that whatever the table represents, and of course we could talk about that and use associations to imagine that, it means that those values represented by the table are going to be relatively easy to reincorporate or to reclaim because the feelings in the dream are positive. Whereas if it had been my dining room table's been left in a damp, dusty basement, it's covered with mold, and I'm cleaning it off, I'm stricken because I realize that we'll never be able to use it again. It's like the dream would mean something totally different. Okay, so this is just this just basic idea that we can use positive emotions and dreams to sort of figure out how we orient to the thing that's happening. So any questions about this? Or if you want to take a second maybe because maybe some of you don't have positive feelings in the dream, but if you do, and you want to apply it to the dream that you brought in right now as a sample. Yeah.
You're going to have to forgive me because this is so algorithmic, as you said earlier, but okay. This applies and like supersedes the whole thing about the dream ego attitude.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, in this case with the father, it's kind of almost opposite, right? Because you could try it on and be like, well, wait a minute, the dream ego's like, yay, I'm having sex with my father. What if the dream ego's wrong? Mm-hmm. And you could try that. But the interesting thing is that, so this is a great question, and I want to see if I can just really get it precise here. The attitude of the dream ego in this case is very different from the waking attitude.
Okay.
Usually that thing about what if the attitude of the dream ego is wrong, usually when that works, it's because our waking attitude is very aligned with the attitude of the dream ego. But it's messy, and it's not going to be 100%. So you might try one thing and then try another thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But great question. There's one here.
This is not necessarily related to this particular key, but as you were talking, I was thinking about how it is that you work with people when working with a dream versus, this process when you're working on your own, there's a lot of like writing and parsing and all of that. When you're working with someone, an analysis, are you kind of doing all of this just on the fly as you're talking to them, or do you have analysts actually work in this way kind of in preparation for your meeting? Or is it more on the fly?
Yeah, it's more of an organic process. And again, I'm working in this kind of like intuitive way where I'm not sort of thinking it through that explicitly, where I just, I hear a dream and I sort of latch on, well, what about this? What about this? And it's not, working with the keys feels, what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of structured. But I find with my own dreams, I can't just work on the fly. I can't, because I'm like, I don't know what it means, But and kind of slowing down and going, okay, let me open up the keys and see, let me try this one. Okay, that helped a little bit. Let me try that one.
Do you think that the act of writing helps you separate yourself a little bit to give that distance?
Yes, yeah, writing it down. And it does slow things down too, right? So yeah, for me the keys, I think they would be helpful for people learning how to interpret dreams. I always think this book is going to be great for Jungian analytic training candidates. It's like, this is the answer to the dream exam right here, just so you know. But really, it's for people working on with their own dreams and that process slowing down. Okay, any other questions about the positive emotion one? Okay, let's try another emotion. Let's try anger. By the way, just to say, Dreams are often very deeply feelingful, not all the times, but I think one of the reasons why dreams fascinate us and stay with us is because of how deeply they can move us. And the subtlety of the emotion that we can feel in dreams, the range of emotions that we can feel in dreams, often surpasses what we might experience in waking life. And I don't, someone made the point earlier, and I think it's so important. Obviously, what we're going through here is kind of a cognitive process. It's sort of structured and, God forbid, a little algorithmic. But I would never want to flatten or take away from the emotional impact of a dream. And so I think there's a certain wisdom in just letting that emotional experience of the dream live in us. Sometimes you have a dream that's so moving that that you don't need to interpret it. It's just an experience. And just letting yourself have that experience and feel it really fully, that in and of itself changes us. So I certainly don't want to leave out that. All right. So let's talk about anger. So anger in dreams, and oftentimes it might be the dream ego who's angry. And anger can sometimes be appropriate and productive, and it's like the right response, and the dream maker saying, yes, you need to be angry. Or it can kind of be a sign that we're defending against something, or working against ourselves in some way. So those are roughly the two positions to parse. So if your dream ego is angry, consider the following questions. Who is your dream ego angry at? What is your dream ego angry about? Is it possible that your dream ego's anger represents a defensive attitude toward an unconscious aspect of yourself? Does your dream ego's anger help to resolve the crisis depicted in the dream, or does it lead to stalemate? So let's look at some examples for this one. Sorry about that. Okay. So I have two dreams. One is going to show one, and the other is going to show the other. So this was actually a dream that I had when I was about 28 years old, and I had just started reading Jung, and I just started working with my dreams, and then I had this dream. So I've been keeping my cat Misty in a basement or garage. Johanna, the old woman from downstairs, had been looking in on her for a weekend while I was away. I didn't take her out of the basement right away once I got back, and Johanna kept looking in on her even after I told her I was back and didn't need her to do so anymore. Johanna started leaving me notes and nagging me to attend to something in the basement that would make it better for Misty. And then, even though I had already paid her for the weekend, she sent me a letter with an itemized invoice for $8,000. The tone of the letter was a bit angry. She explained that she had spent $12 on cat toys and that she had also taken Misty out for a nice lunch at a restaurant that had cost $80. By far, the largest item on the bill was something she had called cat talk, her efforts to communicate with Misty. For this, she charged me $20,000. I was furious. I mean, obviously, my unconscious is no better at math than I am. But, okay, so, I don't, so a little bit like the man with the gold watch dream, I woke up, my 28-year-old self woke up and said, oh my God, that was ridiculous. Oh my God. She was like, nagging me about the basement and $8,000 and what was that? I was like, my conscious waking attitude was very aligned with the attitude of the dream ego in the dream. And of course, I was writing dreams down and working on them, and it took me a little while to be like, oh, maybe this dream is not what I thought it meant. To see that I had been devaluing an aspect of myself, represented by the cat, We have Johanna, who is kind of the wise old woman, who is advocating for that part of myself that was kind of locked in the basement. And what the dream is showing me is that my conscious attitude is defensive. I'm angry at Johanna, right? I don't want to hear from my unconscious telling me that I got to take better self of my soul cat or my cat soul or whatever. You know, I just leave me alone already. So that's the conscious waking attitude, was defensiveness, and that's what we get from the anger in the dream. Okay. So let's look at another dream about anger. This dream was actually sent into the podcast, and I just love this dream. Crocodile in the kids' bedroom. There was a crocodile in our house, as there often is in dreams. He was still and lay in our bedroom while the kids played around him. He made me very anxious. I was aware that we hadn't been feeding him, and I worried that as time went on, he'd eat one of the kids. He had been with us for a few days or a week, the kids jumping around him and playing without a care. One day, he's in the room of our youngest girls, ages 6 and 4. Their room is clean and the lighting is dim and pinkish. The crocodile is facing their bed, and I see his mouth is open as he lies there, and this is the final straw. The girls who are playing in the opposite corner, wow, that's a typo. I need to point this out for when we republish the book. Okay, the girls are playing in the opposite corner. I get them out. I close the door and angrily and confidently confront my husband, saying, "This is ridiculous," and he needs to call someone and get rid of it. He reacts as though I'm being dramatic, and I say, "No, what is crazy is having a crocodile around babies." He nonchalantly relents, but says, "We'll have to split the cost to have it removed, around $200 from each of us." So, you know, in a way, this is kind of related to your question earlier about, like, but aren't zombies bad? Like, are crocodiles bad or crocodiles good? But, you know, but arguably, like, a crocodile doesn't belong in a child's bedroom, you know? So it might have some value in it, but it's kind of in the wrong place in this dream. Okay, so what is the dream maker saying about anger in this dream? What we see is that it takes her a while to get angry, but then she does. And the anger actually helps resolve the crisis in the dream. The crisis is there's a crocodile in the kid's bedroom. And when she gets angry, she's able to bring about an effective solution, or at least it's on its way there by the end of the dream. So this seems to be the dream maker's way of saying, yeah, you've been too passive. You should get a little angry now. That would be a good thing. So, so how to tell the difference that the anger is defensive, as in my dream, or that it's, you know, kind of productive and service to growth in this dream? One way to think about it is, does the anger help bring about a positive resolution in the dream? So in the first dream, there's no positive resolution, right? I'm angry at Johanna, and I'm not going to back down. And Johanna's not going to stop advocating for my cat. There's no resolution in sight. In this dream, they're going to call someone. They're going to get rid of the crocodile. Now, the life situation of this dreamer is I think she had 4 kids, and she was homeschooling. And she said, you know, I liked aspects of it, but I was getting very depleted. And I wanted to put the kids in, so I was negotiating with my husband to put the kids back in school so that I could go to school and then work. And so you see that there was a part of herself that was going hungry, it hadn't been fed, and it was posing a danger to the kids. So she needed to kind of find that, find her anger to bring about a solution. So the same thing can be true for dreams that have other, let's call them aversive feelings, like disgust, for example. You can kind of go through a similar process and see, like, what is the role that the feeling is playing in the dream? What is this feeling doing? Is it just defending against something? Is it changing something? So, any questions on this? Yeah.
Thanks. So, question about when the response to anger is a bit more ambiguous.
Yeah.
So I had another dream where this girl was stealing my stuff, and I was angry about it, and that anger did help me get the stuff back.
Yeah.
And then we go from outside to inside, and at the end, I'm calling her out, and so she's lying on a bed, and I'm just standing over there and yelling. So I don't know how much that was needed, and I was ratting her out to someone else in the house to say she stole my stuff. I did get it back, but I don't know how constructive that was.
Yeah. Well, and at the end, so you get the stuff back, but then you're just kind of, what is she like at the end as you're yelling at her?
I think I can't tell that she's repentant, but she's cowering, so I'm in the dominant position.
Yeah. Yep. And the question is, like, so, you know, what about the fact that you're in a dominant position over her? Like, what aspect of you is she? Do you see what I mean? And so if we think about the key that we saw a minute ago about what are the relationships like in the inner world? So there's this, sorry. So there's this aspect of you who's stolen your stuff. What did she steal, by the way?
My backpack.
Okay, just like the thing you carry all the time, and it has what, like your ID, wallet?
Maybe everything, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So the interesting thing, it's a really great question because I think it shows how the keys can kind of work together. The anger might help. The one about relationships in the inner world might help, and the other one that's going to help with this dream is shadow, because she's likely a shadow figure. So you have a shadowy aspect of yourself, and of course, I'd be curious about, does she remind you of someone you know? What's your imagination about her? Like, what is the quality of that shadow character who's stealing your stuff? And, that's a perfect thing for shadow to do, by the way. Like, that is what shadow often does, is it steals our stuff. And then especially like our ID and our wallet, it's like, wait a minute, I thought I was in charge of my life, but really the shadow's running the show, at least some of the time, right? So in a way, it's good that you have a nice, strong ego, and you could say, no, shadow, but then you're kind of missing out on the gifts that the shadow might be able to bring. Because the shadow might be saying, let me take that all away so that I can open you up and expand your perspective, and you can integrate some more of me. But instead, I think there's kind of a stalemate at the end of that dream, because you're kind of dominating her, and she's just sort of cowering. So in terms of the relationship between you, there's a stuckness about it.
And I now have 2 dreams of a girl that I really don't recognize any characteristics or remember it. Does that suggest I'm very early on in recognizing this shadow?
I'm sorry, because you said because you don't recognize her?
There's so little I can even recall about her. It's just she's a girl.
Yeah, I mean, I would be curious if you have like an imagination. Is she older? Is she younger? Do you have a sense of what she might be like? Just a girl. Yeah. Stay tuned.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Yeah. Elliot.
I have a dream where there's a male, and I definitely get angry just immediately. This male is kind of like me, but more tan, kind of has weird facial hair. Sort of reminds me of like if I had never left northern Maine. Like I did go fishing and smoke Swisher Sweets and get really tan every summer for several years, but then I left. But I was just so angry that this person was kind of in my way, and a little bit of disgust too. But the more I think about it, I'm just like, this is literally just an alternative version of me. So the anger really seems to just serve this purpose of like, hey, this is an opportunity for you to deal with this. But I'm just curious, do you think the anger signifies anything else?
Well, I think the anger in a dream like that, so you're just angry at him because he's in your way.
He says something or like laughs in a weird way, and I think I'm like doing something, but I overreact. I'm more angry than I should be.
Yeah. So, so I think the anger shows you something about your conscious attitude and the way consciousness reacts to a quality that's in the unconscious, which in this case is clearly, again, shadow, right? I mean, he's a great shadow figure. So your conscious attitude is a defensive one against shadow. And again, sort of like I was saying before about the zombies, like to a certain extent, it's normal and healthy to be a little defended against shadow, because shadow can be, shadow's not easy. The problem of shadow, it's not easily solved. So being defended against it is not a bad place to start. But shadow also contains all of these possibilities for growth and enlargement and knowing ourselves more deeply. So there your shadow is like, hey, and you're like, get out of here. So I think that the purpose of the function of the anger in the dream is defending against shadow. And that's kind of like what we know about it. So we've learned something about your conscious attitude toward your shadow, that it's defensive.
I went through a series of dreams where I was lost and confused and trying to find people to help me, and they wouldn't. And in talking about those dreams, I always called it frustration. I was frustrated that they wouldn't listen to me, or frustrated. And when you're talking about this, I'm thinking, I was just pissed.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So, and then, of course, I had to think, who was I really angry with? Was I angry with them, and what part of that is me? So it gives me a lot of food for thought. I will say the last two dreams I've had have been less confused. And when you were talking about positive feelings, I actually had positive feelings in them and questioned the positive feelings, because I'm not used to having those kind of dreams.
Yeah. Most dreams are not, just even statistically, the research that has been done on dreams is that most dreams tend to have negative emotions in them. And I mean, it makes all kinds of sense that would be the case. So yeah, it's not uncommon, but if you do have positive, I mean, there are of course a few exceptions, but in general, if you have positive feelings in the dream, yay, just like wake up with a smile on your face and take it.
Yeah, that was encouraging, because I was like, wait, there must mean something different than that.
Right.
Why is that?
Why is what?
That we have more negative than positive.
Well, I mean, because I mean, all kinds of reasons, right? Because in some sense, dreams, depending on how we want to think about it, in some sense, dreams are about psychic conflicts. The dream maker is not generally going to create a fluffy little dream just to amuse you. The dream maker is trying to help you. So the dream maker is going to point out where something's wrong, and it's probably going to point out wherever the most wrong thing is. So your dreams deal with your inner psychic conflicts. And and then I would also say too, there is this hypothesis that I think makes some sense, is that dreams are an opportunity to rehearse. From an evolutionary perspective, dreams offer a kind of rehearsal opportunity. So again, you're going to rehearse being chased by a predator, in your dreams. You don't generally have, we all have had those dreams that are incredibly beautiful and wonderful and moving, But, that's almost a different category, so. Okay. All right, let's do this key together, and I'll give you a chance to apply it to your dreams, this next one. This is another one that we owe to Pat Berry, and it's just so brilliant. So, when, then, in dreams, sequence usually implies causation. So that's an interesting thing. In the unconscious, if something happens second, we can sort of assume it was caused by whatever came first. All right? So when something happens in a dream, it can be useful to ask yourself, what happened right before that might have caused this? And this is especially helpful when there are sudden scene shifts. So when then works for anything. So it's like, I walked in the room, let's go back to the zombie dream. Yeah, let's look at the zombie dream for a second. When I cut off the hand of the zombie puts its head through the door, right? So if you respond defensively to the zombie by chopping off its hand, it's just going to come at you with more next time. That's the when then. So you can use it literally in every dream, but it's especially helpful when you have a dream with those crazy scene shifts. Like I'm in the grocery store and then all of a sudden I'm, on a beach in a wedding dress. And it's like, okay. When then is really helpful there too. So let's look at this dream as an example. I get a phone call from my friend who tells me that she had the best night out at this great place and she invites me to meet her there. I arrive and it turns out to be a hair salon. She sits on my left side and the hairdresser tends to her, not taking much notice of me. He wants to apply to my friend's hair the special natural hair dye that he invented. He says he doesn't think that it will work for me. His female assistant arrives and asks me to write down 3 wishes. I am distracted, so I just write something down and realize that one of the wishes is for an upside-down house. The scene changes and I'm in a very tight and small house on stilts with my 9-year-old son. The people from the previous scene have placed spiced cake and mushrooms for us to eat on a plate. I have one piece of the very tasty cake, wondering if my son is going to try some, but doubting it. I try to reach for more cake, but it's so tight and I can barely reach around to get more because my arm cannot bend far enough. Okay, so this is a great example of that kind of crazy scene shift, right? So when I write down that I wish for an upside-down house, then the scene changes and I'm in a very tight and small house on stilts with my 9-year-old son. So what do we get from that? So I love the fact that she was offered 3 wishes and then she blows it, which is what always happens in every fairy tale, right? So exactly that thing happens here. She's distracted. She's given an opportunity. And in fact, she had this dream when she was presented with an opportunity to start a business with a friend who's in the dream, and she was nervous about it. So she's given this incredible opportunity, 3 wishes, and she squanders it and kind of thinks too small. And she just kind of tosses it away. I wish for an upside-down house. And that leaves her in a constrained place. It's this tight, small house on stilts. And it's too tight to even reach around and get some more of the cake. So when she wishes for an upside-down house, then she winds up in a tight, small house. Or we could say something like this. When she doesn't allow herself to take full advantage of the opportunities she's given, then she winds up putting herself in a small, narrow place where she can't have more of the delicious thing. You see that? Are there questions about that?
So what do you do when you have a dream where when you're having it, it feels very sequential? There's no crazy scene shift or anything, but when you wake up, you're confused kind of on when certain things took place. Is that just not the right key to apply, or?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that if it feels like there's a very confusing order, it's probably not the right key. But any time that you've got even a little string of causality, or even if it's a little bit that well, this happened and then that happened, you can always try it. But yeah, that does happen where you just can't trace a narrative. Yeah, another question over here. Did I see another hand? No? Okay. You know what? Why don't we take just a minute and see if you can apply when then to whichever dream you brought today, or and let's kind of trial it. Okay, does anyone want to share anything that came up, or?
I'm going to give this a try. I'm not really sure if I'm doing this right, but here we go. So in one of my dreams, this guy's father comes sliding into a pawn shop. I'm in the pawn shop with his wife and her, my Jessica. Anyways, I'm in the pawn shop, and the husband comes sliding into the room with a bunch of paperwork, and I think, oh, this guy looks kind of like a wizard. And then suddenly we're in a new room at the pawn shop that contains these 3 beautiful items. And I was just wondering, is that, I don't really know what to make of when then in this case. I just know that he slides in, got a lot of paperwork, he's kind of wizardy, and now I'm in a room with 3 magical items.
So what made you think in the dream that he looked like a wizard? Do you know?
That wizard from not the Lord of the Rings, the other one that was with Bilbo and The Hobbit,
Hobbit.
yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Radagast, I think his name
Uh-huh,
was. You know, like he rides around on that sled, and he's kind of ratty looking.
Mm-hmm.
He kind of looked like that, and
Okay.
he's kind of
Okay.
spastic.
And did you have a sense of, like, was that a positive sort of association? Like, oh, he looks like a wizard, or did you have a sense of that?
It was more like, what a silly fellow.
Mm-hmm.
More like I didn't take him very seriously
Mhm.
because it was actually his wife who was showing me around the shop,
Mm-hmm.
and she's the one who then appears in the other room and is showing me those items.
Got it. And the items in the other room are magical items.
Yeah, there are these 3 really beautiful, fancy guitars that, yeah.
Those can be magical items.
Yeah, I know. So does Jessica.
So what I would say about that is, and I need a little more context figured out, but so he comes in as this kind of disruptive force. Like you said, he's kind of ratty, he's kind of all over the place, something like that.
Yeah.
So there's something unexpected. It seems a little bit like it's a disturbance, or something untoward, and you look down on him a little bit. He's a little bit of a hot mess, you know. But it's like when that new thing comes in, then you have access to the room with the magical guitars.
Right.
And that is actually often the way it is with creativity, right? Like, to be creative, you have to be able to let in that messy, unpredictable thing that maybe at first doesn't seem to have a lot of value. Or it seems like maybe it's even a challenge to the things that we value. It's messy, it's maybe a little silly, we're not taking it very seriously, but it comes in, and at first you're a little bit put off, but you also do recognize the wizard-like quality, and that allows you to access the beautiful guitars in the next room. So I think he would represent some aspect of your unconscious that maybe you're not entirely comfortable with, but comfortable enough that it can come in and you can see that it has, that it's like a wizard. But yeah, I think that's a great example.
Okay, all right. I suppose just a quick follow-up question, because is it something like when I'm writing music, I always think to myself, man, I really am editing myself a lot here. What would it be like if I just didn't do that? But I can never let myself do that for lots of reasons. But is that sort of we talk about external dynamics that are at work? Is that something,
Yeah, it might be. I mean, it really could be, because what I notice is that the way you describe the dream ego has some judgment about this guy, right? It's like, what did you say? He's,
a little bit spastic.
A little bit spastic.
Yeah.
He's a little goofy.
Yeah.
So the dream ego sees there might be something valuable there, but is also a little bit looking down on him.
Right.
And it seems to me like that might also be going on for you when you're writing music, that you're welcoming it in, but before something's polished, it often does make us cringe. It's like, oh, did I just write that, really?
Yeah, okay, fact, yeah.
But,
yeah, thank you.
Anyone else?
This is more of a question, sort of a variation of this key, and I'm curious to ask, whenever you have a dream, would it be useful to ask the question, what happened within the last 24 hours or in the last week even, or maybe even the coming week, that may have caused this dream to happen?
Yeah.
That something recent in the immediate history has some sort of impact, or causal impact.
Yeah.
I just wanted to get your impression on
Yeah, no, that's a really great question. So, and I guess it has kind of I think it has a complicated answer. First of all, dreams will always comment on what's going on for you, right? So, like I said earlier, a lot of times it's talking about what's going on in the inner world. But dreams are very interested in what you're doing in your life. both in the inner world and the outer world. So it's not, people come in and it's like, oh, is this a cool dream? But I want to know, what is it about? Like, what is the dream relating to? And so always in the book and in the keys, we're always saying, why did you have this dream now? Why did you have this dream now? Where is this in your life? One of the questions that I'll sometimes ask people pretty frequently when I'm working with someone and they bring in a dream and I have no idea what it could be about, I'll say, what was taking up space for you in your thoughts in the past 24, 48, 36 hours? And it might not be the thing, like maybe you're working on a big deadline at work and you're really focused on that, but off in the background there's like a niggling awareness of something and you kind of know it's there, but you're not really focused on it. Maybe like, I don't know, maybe you're worried about you had a rough interaction with a friend or something and that's just kind of floating around the edges while you're really focused on work. Well, I'd be curious, could the dream relate to that problem that you're having with your friend? So I think absolutely, what's going on in your outer life? What's taking up space in your thoughts? It's not always that the dream is going to relate directly to the thing you're most consciously preoccupied by, but it often is. I mean, if you're having a big conflict with your daughter, and then you have a dream with your daughter in it, yeah, it's probably relating to that situation somehow. So I think it's very, very important to know what's going on in your current life. That's why on the podcast, one of the things, if you ever submit a dream to the podcast, one of the questions is, what's the real life context? Are you going through any life transitions? What's going on? Because it's very difficult to have any idea what the dream might mean without some idea about how it relates to your life. Then the other thing I wanted to say was, you said what caused the dream. And that's the one thing I don't know that I would quite use that word, but it does take us back to Jung's idea about that dreams are compensatory. So instead of saying what caused the dream, it's more like, why did the dream maker send me this dream now? That's how I think about it causally. Is that the dream maker is interested in affecting some change in your attitude, and what's the attitude, and why does it need? Why is it hoping to change it now? So it's a good question. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sorry. Oh, good. Okay. Yes.
Hi, I'm acting as a proxy for Kimberly on Zoom,
Okay.
who writes, last night I dreamed I saw a woman with long blonde hair and white with a white cat that was long-haired, soft, friendly, and she was petting it. Then I had some tasks to do for her, and then I was with two quite small black dogs that were snarling and growling at me, one more than the other, so I felt I had to put my hand on the one that was more snippy and subdue it, in which after some persistence I did by pressing down on it and immobilizing it, and it stopped growling at me. I realized all along that the dogs were not really going to bite me, but I wanted to stop them from snarling. Emotion, bothered but not afraid. I just feel like it is something I need to do, sense of control and domination, context, some difficulties with my adult daughter, and I feel I should just let go of worrying about it or trying to change it. Two very different scenes.
So two very different scenes, meaning?
The way I'm interpreting that is the animals aspect of it, and then conflict with the daughter.
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious about the fact that there's this white woman in white with the white cat, and then there are the two dogs. So there's something here about these sort of opposites, So I think in terms of let's see, maybe the kind of emotion and the sense of how the ego is relating to these contents. I'm curious about what the feeling is about the woman in white with a white cat versus the feeling towards the dogs. So she told us how she felt about the dogs. It kind of sounds like a little bit of irritation. But I'm curious about what she felt about the white woman and the white cat. My guess is that that was positive, and then the dogs are negative. Somehow something wants to come through with those dogs, and she's trying to kind of quell it. But I'd be very curious about what the dogs might have to say. So.
Okay, so I've been listening to your book on Audible as I do my daily walks for the last few weeks, and I had a really interesting dream about a week ago.
Okay.
So I dreamt that I was given a baby. I didn't have the baby. It was given to me like a gift. But my feeling, even though I was happy, was I'm not ready for this. I'm not prepared for this. So I kept trying to find a place to put the baby down, but I didn't have a crib, and I just didn't have anywhere to place the baby. But I did finally put it on a chair and kind of went about my business, and then the baby fell on its face. And I was horrified, and I approached the baby. I wanted to pick it up, but I was afraid if I picked it up, I would injure it more. So I thought, I'm going to roll it over and then pick it up. But I didn't want to step to the baby. I wanted it to come to me. So I rolled it over a few times and kept injuring it till it got to me and I could just bend down and pick it up. So then I had the baby again, and I kept thinking, well, if I can just wash my hands, if I can just set down the baby long enough to wash my hands, I'll be good. But I don't have a crib. I knew if I put it on the bed, it would crawl off the bed to me. And so I brought it into the bathroom with me to wash my hands, and I was holding it. And I saw myself in the mirror above the sink, and in that moment, I realized I had this feeling of like, oh, now I understand why new mothers say like they can't shower, they don't have time to shower, and they just are messy. And then I also had a feeling that like it was me, and that I knew I would never be able to move forward without it being with me. I couldn't put it down. So when I initially woke up and thought about it, of course, my initial assumption, my conscious assumption was that I've had a very transformative past few years, life-changing.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, oh, and I've been doing so much creative work and contemplation and studying. And I thought, this gift's been given to me as like all the stuff I'm creating, you know what I mean? Like, but I keep trying to set it down and find a foundation to put it on, and I can't find the right foundation. That was my initial assumption. Upon further reflection, I couldn't make sense of that assumption with the baby injuring itself and me rolling the baby and continuing to injure it. And I realized I'm a massage therapist, and in the past probably 5 months, I've been pushing myself to work against my better judgment, extremely hard.
Yeah.
So much so that I've had tendonitis in my thumb, I've had tendonitis in my wrist, and this has all been happening in the past few weeks, the culmination of the injuries. And I knew in that moment, once I figured out that the baby injured itself, that the baby, I think, was me, like a reborn, transformed me, that I kept trying to put down so I could return to my old stubborn self.
Yes.
And just force
Yes.
things that I wanted to happen.
Yeah.
Even though, and not integrating the new self that knew better. And so I don't know if I'm right, but it all clicked in that moment oh, and I forgot one thing. When I did finally pick up the baby said to me, maybe rolling me over and over wasn't a good idea. So anyway, I just felt like really just like a lot of clarity around my stubborn old self not integrating this new self
Mhm.
and going back to old bad
Yep.
habits. Anyway, I just thought that was
Yeah,
an
no.
interesting dream to have at this moment when I'm
Mhm.
listening to your book.
Well, and the thing is, so, you know, it's like sometimes we do we've done the work and we do get gifted with this baby. But like you're saying, oftentimes we don't really want to have to deal with what it means to have changed.
Yeah.
So you've done all this work and you've got this beautiful thing, but you know, but something's being asked of you, and that it means things are going to have to be different.
Yeah.
And instead, you just kind of want to roll over your instincts.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I know there was one more question here. Right? Yeah. Yeah.
This is a shorter. I was wondering what you would say about dreams where the preceding incident is that the person has died, and you see this person in your dream, and I know that it's happened with friends of mine too. I happen to have recently had a dream like that.
So you're talking about where someone in your outer life has passed away, and then you dream of the person.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
someone in my life, a close person. Well, this instant was my son.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry.
So, yeah.
You know, grief dreams are a whole category of dreams, and we did not talk about them in this book, but just because we didn't have space. But what I will say is there are some beautiful books about grief dreams. And Susan, what is her name? The book is called By Grief Transformed, or that's one of the titles of the book. She's a Jungian analyst. Susan, can't remember her last name. But if you look By Grief
look it up.
Transformed, it's
Yeah.
beautiful.
Thank you.
But grief dreams, I'll just say really briefly, I mean, one of the ways to understand grief dreams is that they're helping us integrate the awareness of the loss. And grief dreams, a little bit like trauma dreams, can often sort of start fairly rigid, but then they change, and the way that our loved one appears in the dream often changes, and sometimes according to a kind of a typical pattern. They kind of grow more and more remote, actually. And, you know, Marie-Louise von Franz thought, you know, I think that's because the soul of the deceased kind of hangs around for a little while and then is gone. You know, she kind of took it pretty literally. And Jung felt like when his father appeared to him in a dream, that his father had come and visited him in the dream. So I think there's lots of room to understand these dreams, both a little metaphysically and also psychologically. So we just have a few more minutes. I have just another slide to share, but maybe I'll see, does anyone want to get in a last question?
Hey, I was wondering if you had any thoughts about children's dreams and at what age they might become significant, and whether these keys we've discussed today can be applied verbatim, or do they need like some adapting and nuance when you're trying to help a child work through their dreams?
Yeah. I mean, I think that children's dreams are always important. And, you know, and we do talk about them just a little bit in the book. I mean, they are, Jung said, and I think he's totally right about this, that children's psyches are closer to the unconscious, and so their dreams can be quite filled with really remarkable archetypal imagery. And I think that Jung had his earliest recalled dream was when he was 3 or 4, and it in some ways kind of prefigured his whole life's work. I don't think that's true for all of us, but I think any remembered dream you have from childhood, or if your child is dreaming, it can be, you know, a really wonderful thing to maybe write those dreams down for your child, if you choose. I think a lot of times children's dreams don't need to be interpreted so much as, you know, I think if you have a child who's dreaming, to help the child understand that the dream is important, normalize the scariness of it and maybe try to provide some context around it, because a lot of times children have nightmares, right? And so not to make light of the fear, but to maybe indicate that that it's okay, to have scary dreams, that we all do, and maybe even a little bit like, oh, I wonder what that big scary, lion, I wonder if that big scary lion might, want to play with you instead of eat you. You could sort of work with it like that. I think the principles in the keys is the same. I just don't know that young children would be able to relate to it like that. But older kids might be able to use some of these, like when then, for example, could be an interesting thing. So
thank you.
Okay.
I just want to make a quick comment about that. And I wish I could remember the name of the book, but there's a great book on Amazon that is actually transcripts of symposiums conducted by Carl Jung, where they discuss children's dreams.
Yeah, it's called Children's Dreams.
Yeah, and what's amazing about it is in it, Carl Jung speaks like a normal human being, rather than the his works being so dense.
Yeah.
But it's just interpretation of one child's dream after another, and it was a great book.
Yeah, it is. It's really great. Yeah, they have a lot of those transcribed seminars that are now being published by Philemon. Some of them have been published before, like the Vision seminars is like that, and the Zarathustra seminars, and then there are more that have been published by Philemon. But I agree with you. I think they're such a delight to read. So these would be Jung giving seminars maybe at the Institute or at the Psychological Club or somewhere else. And so you just, he's just talking and he asks the audience a question and he's like, no, yes. And you get the back and forth, and it's his personality comes through, and that's a great book. I love that book. So I'm going to take you out here with one final beautiful slide. We know that something unknown, alien, does come our way, just as we know that we do not ourselves make a dream or an inspiration, but that it somehow arises of its own accord. What does happen to us in this manner can be said to emanate from mana, from a daimon, a god, or the unconscious. So I hope that you treasure your dreams, and maybe you got some tools today to work with them a little bit. So thank you so much. Oh, and then I asked just to add this one too. There.
Just one note before you guys all leave. If you have a book for Lisa to sign, if you could come out into the lobby or outside, there's a cleaning crew coming in here in just a little bit, and they want us to take it outside. So